Okay, so if you haven't watched part 1 and part 2, this is about human rights and how they are being breached by stopping people riding e-scooters. Uh, at today we're on the Human Rights Act 1998. 1998. So that'll be regarding the UK. Um, so let's just get cracking. I've already covered a few of these articles because, like I said in my first video, most human rights are like universal. They carry over. Like, for example, say in the Constitution, there'll be the same kind of rights, human rights, in the Human Rights Act. But in the Human Rights Act, there's less details. Excuse me. Excuse me. But in the Human Rights Act, there's less details. So that's why it's good to look up different conventions and different human rights to get a broad idea of what you're on about. So in this one, I've already covered a few of them, so I won't have to go over many of them. But let's look at the ones I haven't gone over. Or, well, the ones I have, but like where it's in a different perspective. Alright, so Article 5, I believe. I can't remember the name of that because I haven't got it printed out. There we go. Right to Human Rights Act 1998, Article 5, rights to liberty and security. And in part 5 of that, it says, everyone who has been the victim of arrest or detention in contravention of the provisions of this article shall have an enforceable right to compensation. So basically, if you get arrested for something and it is in breach of your human rights, and basically that either that statutory law or whatever reason that police arrested you for violates your human rights, that counts as, going against this document, if that makes sense, or this act itself. So you have the right to be compensated for that. Like, for example, if you get arrested for something and you basically say, look, it's in breach of human rights, and they find you not guilty or they drop the charges, then in return you have the right to be given compensation for your troubles. So, like wherever you travelled, whether you've been damaged in a way, like mentally, reputation wise, physically. So yeah. Right, let's move on. Article 6, right to a fair trial again. This again says about how right, let's just read it actually. In the determination of his civil rights and obligations or any criminal charge against him, everyone is entitled to a fair and public hearing within a reasonable time by an independent and impartial tribunal established by law. I'll just cover that quick. So there's a misconception when you go to court. Well, I say misconception is because they symbolically make it look like this to make you be scared. But when you go to court, you feel as though you're outnumbered, because there's so many people around. You feel as though you're outnumbered. So automatically it feels like it's not a fair trial. But they're actually impartial, which means they're not allowed to take sides. So when you go to a court, don't go there assuming that the judge hates you or assuming that he's going to take the prosecution side, because by lawfully they're not allowed to. So the moment they are, you can bring that up. You can bring up the fact that it's so it kind of helps you a lot actually if they are like that, because if you go to court and the judge is clearly against you, you could bring it up. You'd be like, you're in violation of my human rights. Right to fair trial. You're not supposed to take sides. Or like, even knowing this, it gives you a bit of clarity. So when you go in court, it might make you feel a bit better, because I thought that they were all going to be against me. But when I got there and I was like clear, it was clear that something hadn't been done correctly by the CPS, i.e. sending me my evidence. The woman who was, I think she was the legal advisor, she was like on my side, mate. You know what I mean? Like, she had to come across like she wasn't on my side, but she was in a way. But because she had to be impartial and not take sides, she done it in a way as like, yeah, like, she was smart about it. Let's say that she was taking my sides, but not, if that makes sense. Like, she wasn't obviously taking my side. She was obviously taking the side of the law, but she made sure she brought that up to help me. So yeah, going back to right to fair trial. Yeah, so in future, if you go court, don't worry, because they have to be impartial. They have to not take sides. So if you are literally not in the wrong, and it is very reasonable that you're not, then there's a very good chance you can get away with it. If the laws are not clear or whatever, or if they're in breach of human rights. All right, so let's keep going. Judgment shall be pronounced publicly by the press, and public may be excluded from all part of the trial in the interest of morals. Public order or national security is in a democratic society where the interests of juveniles are protected. We read this earlier. The protection of private life of the parties so require, or to the extent strictly necessary in the opinion of the court in the special circumstances where publicity would prejudice the interest of justice. And a part of that, in section 3 of that, everyone charged with a criminal offence has the following minimum rights: to be informed promptly in a language which he understands and in detail of the nature and cause of the accusation against him. That was what. Bugger! Just dropped my phone. Right, so that was going to be a part of my opening statement. That was going to be a part of my opening statement. Right to a fair trial, because those of you who know, or those of you who don't know, in court they speak a different language. It sounds like English, looks like English, but it's not English. It's called legalese, and there will be other versions in different countries, I guess, where it's very close and identical to the language you're speaking, but the words have different meanings. So technically, they're speaking different language. And so what I was planning on doing is, once I got in the courtroom, my opening statement, I was going to make it very clear that I want to exercise my human right to a fair trial, and I want the trial to be spoken in plain English. That was going to be my first request, and because you have to understand in detail the language before they can start, throwing accusations at you. So yeah, part 3B of right to a fair trial, you need to have adequate time and facilities for preparation of your defence. Again, going back to my video, the first video and the second video of this, because I wasn't sent the evidence regarding my case, they had to drop the case because they didn't give me the adequate time and facilities to prepare for my defence. So just by nearly violating one human right to a fair trial, they had to throw it out. Defend himself in person. So that goes on, like whether, that just covers whether you can represent yourself, or you can choose to have a solicitor. I personally recommend you represent yourself, but you have to know what you're talking about if you are going to do that, because there's so many ways they can get you in a courtroom if you're representing yourself and you don't know like a few basics, you could get in a lot of trouble. You could get in, quite a bit of trouble if you go in there silent and you're afraid, and you don't speak up for yourself in court and you're representing yourself. You could find yourself in a bad position, because I'm not trying to discourage people. I try and encourage representing yourself, but I don't want to say to someone, hey, represent yourself, then go in there and then the judge ask him a question that is like a claim or accusation against him, and because like that person's too scared to answer, that maybe they go silent, through tacit silence. It's called tacit law, I believe, tacit silence. If in a courtroom, if someone makes a claim on you and you stay silent, it basically means you agree with them terms. So if they I don't want someone to go in a courtroom, be asked a question, or be a claim being made against him or her, and because they're a bit afraid and they're a bit shocked because they're in court, they're on their own, I don't want them to get in trouble because they didn't know what to say. So I do recommend that you represent yourself, but I highly recommend that you educate yourself at least to the basics before you go there. But anyway, let's keep going. Oh yeah, also, because I believe solicitors are they're not there to teach you the law, they're there to further confuse you about the law in order to make you feel like you need them, because that's where they make their money. Right. Article 7, this is an important one. No punishment without law. No one shall be held guilty of any criminal offence on account of any act or omission which did not constitute a criminal offence under national or international law, when at the time it was committed, nor shall a heavier penalty be imposed than the one that was applicable to the time the criminal offence was committed. Right, so that's basically saying if there is no law that covers what they're arresting you for, they cannot punish you for it. And in my case, that was my biggest argument. That was the biggest violation of the human rights. Well, not the biggest, but there was a violation nonetheless. But it was a main point, I like to say, because I looked up the legislation of e-scooters, and the only thing I found regarding them was the regulation, the Coronavirus and E-Scooter Regulation Act. Regulation. It was literally just a regulation, not an act. And it's just rules regarding the trial e-scooters. And I haven't got a trial e-scooter, so that doesn't cover me. And they're trying to arrest people who are using privately ones for driving a motor vehicle. But if you go in the Road Traffic Act 1988 and check up the meanings of motor vehicle, you won't see anywhere defined an e-scooter. So technically, it's not a motor vehicle. So you cannot be punished here because there's no law. And them arresting people for it or seizing their vehicle, you're punishing them without the law. So that's directly in violation of Article 7 of the Human Rights Act, no punishment without law. And if you look in, I believe it's the European Convention of Human Rights, which goes in more detail about the no punishment without law, where they basically say, this is through case law as well, where they say laws have to be very clear and very specific in order to to put a law on someone. You have to be very, very specific about that law. You have to take every detail. Anyone who's looked up legislation would know when you read through it, there is lots of detail when they write out a simple sentence or claim. If they've got a law or whatever, they'll have to, for example, a motor vehicle. If you go on Road Traffic Act and look at the Road Traffic Act 1988 and look up the meanings of motor vehicles, you'll see things like motorcycle. It will have the definition of a mechanically propelled vehicle that doesn't weigh no more than 400 kilos, has no more than 3 wheels, and like loads of little details to specify exactly what it is. And in this case, with the e-scooters, there is no specific explanation for an e-scooter on there, so technically there is no law about it. So they're in breach of that, and because it's not clear, they shouldn't be arresting people for it, or charging them, or seizing their vehicle, seizing their scooter, or anything. So that is directly in violation of Article 7, no punishment without law. And there's been case law to prove this. Like, there's been murder cases not murder cases. There's been cases where people have died. Someone's got someone killed, or someone's died, or bad things have happened, and because the defense has basically said, look, there's no law that clearly states that I done this or done that, they've got away with it. And it's cases that cases that are more important than bloody e-scooters. So if they can get away with it, if someone can be killed and someone be found or given a lesser sentence because there isn't a law that specifically stated what they was or was not supposed to do that caused that person's death, and they're getting a lesser sentence or getting let off, you can't tell me that the same can't apply to an e-scooter. You know what I mean? Like, because in my eyes, a loss of life is a lot more important than someone riding an e-scooter. So if someone can get away with the loss of life because the law or whatever wasn't clear enough surrounding the reasons why that person was killed, then I know it sounds vulgar, but you can't tell me that it can't apply to e-scooters as well, because e-scooters is nowhere near as bad. And Article 17, the prohibition of rights. It's the same again. Like, it's basically saying the judges and the police are not allowed to abuse your human rights. Alright, so that is the end for the human rights part, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm really open to comments below. I apologise if I'm rushing. It's just I want to get all this information down. I've got a lot to go through. I still want to get it while it's fresh in my mind. And I do plan on making a video that covers all this stuff more detail and better. But at the moment, I just want to release as much information as I can, just to nip it in the bud, so I can get it while it's fresh. So thank you for watching, and I will hopefully see you soon and hear from you soon. Just leave me a comment below, and I'll try. Well, I will answer as many as I can. Thank you very much.